Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen of Pop Culture. A little while back, I did a deep dive into the D&D basic set that was written by J. Holmes, oftentimes just called Holmes Basic. And so to follow up, I thought I'd do similar videos on this basic set, and probably on the expert set as well, and I may go beyond that too. The idea is to, well, especially to help people who don't really know much about older versions of Dungeons & Dragons and might consider certain aspects of it silly or wrong. They kind of talk about why they do things the way they do, what's behind it, and, well, maybe to just create more appreciation for these old games, because, boy, they did some pretty amazing things, kind of created a whole giant industry that even people who play, video games now enjoy to some degree. So let's jump in. TSR, Dungeons & Dragons Fantasy Adventure Game Basic Set with Introductory Module. Now, this was the first D&D set I ever owned. It was not this particular one. I do still have my original book, my original module, but the box got destroyed over the years. This is another one that I bought. And though the box is in pretty bad shape, the interior was in pretty good shape. So let's pull that off of there. You can see we still have, in this particular set, the dice with the crayon still sealed in the little baggie, which is kind of cool. And I don't feel any particular need to ever take those out. So, copyright 1980, TSR Hobbies, Incorporated. The original fantasy role-playing game for 3 or more adults, ages 10 and up, which I think is kind of interesting. So, for those adults who are 11, 10 years old, you're good to go. So this is the basic rule book. And then we have in here the introductory module, the Keep on the Borderlands, a classic, where a lot of us began our first games of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, we're not going to go through the module in this one. We're just going to be looking at the rules. We also have the 1981 TSR Hobbies Incorporated catalog. I might look through this on a future live stream. That would probably be fun. This one still has the RPGA, Role-Playing Game Association, entry form you could fill out. Take us along on your adventure. Dungeons & Dragons Basic Set opens a world of fantasy adventure where magic and dragons are real, etc. And here we have a nice ad for the Dungeons & Dragons Endless Quest books. I have a few of those. Maybe we'll show those off in another stream. Or maybe a stream someday. And we also have the complete series of fine TSR products. And boy, there's a lot on there. All right, let's move this box out of the way. Let's put the rule book front and center, and let's go through this baby. Now, we're not going to read this word for word as we go through, although I will read a few passages, but we're going to primarily look at the rules, how they were set up. And, I might cover some of the same ground that I did under the other basic set. And we maybe talk about a little bit about how the two basic sets differed and why. All right. Now you notice the 3-hole punch. Now I took advantage of that with my book way back when, and with my expert set, so that I put them in a binder, and I actually combined the two rules into one. Because you notice you got like B1 and B5, for your page numbers, and the other one is X1, X5, or whatever. So I did that. I kind of regret it, but at the time, it was really just about having something that was very useful for running a game, and I wasn't worried about the value in the future. So, Dungeons & Dragons Fantasy Adventure Game Basic Rulebook by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, edited by Tom Moldvay, previous edition edited by J. Holmes. Copyright 1974, 77, 78, and 1981. Edited by Tom Moldvay, and that's why we oftentimes will call this Moldvay Basic. Illustrations by Jeff D., David S. LaForce, Erol, Otus, James Roslof, Bill Willingham. Cover by Erol, Otus. Some of the greats. Willingham is still making comic books. In fact, I just listened to him on a live stream recently. So forward. Now, we're not going to go heavy into the forward here, but it kind of gives you a little idea of what the game is, how it works, the basic concept. We have this passage here, for example. The D&D game has neither losers nor winners. It only has gamers who relish exercising their imagination. The players and the DM share in creating adventures in fantastic lands where heroes abound and magic really works. In a sense, the D&D game has no rules, only rule suggestions. No rule is inviolate, particularly if a new or altered rule will encourage creativity and imagination. The important thing is to enjoy the adventure. Okay, very nice. And we have, again, a couple paragraphs on what the game is all about. We're not going to go heavy into that. How to use the book kind of gives you, the different chunks of it. Now, this, I think, is interesting. This rule booklet deals mostly with adventure in a dungeon and explains the different player character classes, in parentheses, professions, from the first to the third level of experience. These and other terms will be explained later in this booklet. The D&D expert set adds to these rules, providing further details for player character classes from 4th to 14th level of experience, and gives rules for adventuring in the wilderness outside of the dungeons. A supplement, the D&D companion set, provides further details for player character classes from the 15th to the 36th level of experience. Now, when I bought my basic and expert sets, that wouldn't have been in there because the companion set didn't exist yet. But I will point out that in the Holmes rules, it refers you for higher levels of experience to advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So what we have here is where we get the split. Because back in the day, you had the advanced Dungeons and Dragons system, and you had the Dungeons and Dragons system, which frankly, when I was a kid, we mixed the two together quite a bit. A lot of that just being because we all learned on basic and expert. Then we got advanced, and we more or less just grabbed things that we liked out of advanced. But we used the same rules we were always using. In as much as we read the rules at all, we were, at that point, I was about 12 when I first got into it. So, we weren't real sticklers on things. So it does say here, the booklet is drilled with holes so that if desired, the pages may be cut apart and rearranged in a ring binder, which I did. Thanks a lot, Tom, for sending me down that path. So we get definitions of standard D&D terms. It does tell you to read this section carefully. Now, I assume a lot of people here know Dungeons & Dragons, so we're not going to go through this real heavily, but you're going to get things about, the mapper, the party, the caller. Well, maybe I should talk about that for a moment, because that was an assumption at one point in the game. It says at the start of the game, the players enter the dungeon, and the DM describes what the characters can see. One player should draw a map from the DM's descriptions. That player is called the mapper. As the player characters move further into the dungeon, more and more of the dungeon is mapped. Eventually, the DM's map and the player's map will look more or less alike. Now, that's still generally done in D&D. Usually one person will handle the map. But here's the part that sort of fell away. To avoid confusion, the players should select one player to speak for the entire group or party. That player is named the caller. When unusual situations occur, each player may want to say what his or her character is doing. The caller should make sure that he or she is accurately representing all the player character's wishes. The caller is a mediator between the players and the DM and should not judge what the player characters should do. Yeah, well, a lot of us judge while we're playing. Like, seriously? No, you don't want to do that, do you? But we don't really have the caller role too much in these days. I think if you're doing in combat, if you're doing initiative by the different sides of the fight instead of individual, collar could make sense because it would force the players to sort of work out what they're all doing on a given round of combat, and they could maybe coordinate themselves a little bit better than is typical. I've had some groups that did not work well together, and not because of ego or anything like that. They were just sort of chaotic, and they were all over the place. So we talk about experience points, or XP. We talk about different uses of the word level, like, your level of experience or spell levels and things of that nature, and different levels of dungeons. It does get used a lot, so they make sure people understand all that. We get a little bit about dice, classic illustration here. How to win. Winning and losing, things important to most games, do not apply to D&D games. The DM and the players do not play against each other, even though the DM often plays the role of various monsters which threaten the player characters. The DM must not take sides. He or she is a guide and a referee, the person who keeps the action flowing and creates an exciting adventure. Player characters have fun by overcoming fantastic obstacles and winning treasure, but this does not end the game, nor is the game lost when an unlucky player's character dies, since the player may simply roll up a new character and continue playing. A good D&D campaign is similar to the creation of a fantasy novel written by the DM and the players. And, role-playing games were very new, and they were new to a lot of people. They'd never played them before. So, I think people will argue about this a bit, but I think the point of it is we're not talking about Scrabble. We're not talking about Monopoly, where there's one winner at the end of the game. This is something different, and I think they want people to understand that. So, here we get to the meat of the thing. How to create a player character. We're going to see a sample character sheet, which, by the way, is basically how I still like to set mine up if I can. Line paper works beautifully. This dude is named Borg. He's a fighter. I do like that they also give you this summary here for everybody. Roll for ability scores. Choose a class. Note special abilities and spells. Adjust scores as desired. Note bonuses for high scores. Roll hit points. Roll for money. Equip the character. Find armor class, attack, and saving throw numbers. Name the character. Notice there's nothing on the list that says work out an extraordinarily complex and long personal history for the character, because when you do that, and when you draw a really good picture of your character, it means they're going to die. And they're going to die very soon. Don't ask me why, but it happens all the time. Okay, so here we get a little more specific. Blank sheet of paper, write down the names of the 6 player character abilities: strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. Now it says in that order. Now, there's a method behind that madness. And you'll also notice this is a different order than you got, I think, in Holmes Basic. We'll talk about the reason in just a moment. Strength, intelligence, wisdom are the prime requisites for the earliest 3 character classes in D&D: fighter, magic user, cleric. Now, in one of the supplements to the original game, we got the thief, whose primary attribute was dexterity. But initially, constitution, dexterity, and charisma, in that order, were the sort of secondary 3 ability scores. They gave you bonuses to things, but they didn't influence your earned experience points like the prime requisites did. Here, they change it up a little bit because the thief was added. So now dexterity was also a prime requisite. Of course, it also gave you some special bonuses. So we roll 3 dice 6 for a result of 3 to 18 for each ability, and put the result in pencil next to the name of the ability. So that does assume you're rolling 3 dice 6 in order. Read the sections on character abilities and character classes and choose a class which best suits your character. Write down any special abilities. We already know that. Read the section on ability score adjustments, page B6, and then adjust your character's ability scores if so desired. Consult the table of bonuses and penalties and make a note of the results next to exceptional ability scores. Set aside a section of the paper for experience points, or XP. As a new character, mark down 0 for the number of starting XP. For future reference, make a note of the number of XP needed to advance to second level. Determine the number of hit points your character has. Read the section on character alignment. Roll 3d6, multiply the result by 10. That's for your gold pieces that you're going to spend on equipment. Then you consult the costs of equipment. Now that you know what type of armor your character will be wearing, check the armor class table and write down the number of your character's armor class in a section marked armor class or AC. Find the character attacks table, record the scores your character needs to hit the various armor classes when in battle. So no THAC0 yet. Check the saving throws table, page B26, write down the various scores. You get the idea. And then, of course, come up with a name. So let's move to the next sections. Again, I love this art. This woman, player dreaming about being a magic user. This dude dreaming about being a fighter. Very cool. So character abilities, and we get a little description of each. Here, strength is a measure of muscle power and the ability to use that power. Any character with a strength score of 13 or above should consider one of the following 4 classes: fighter, dwarf, elf, or halfling. Okay, wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. In earlier versions of D&D, dwarf, elf, halfling are character races, not character classes. So the thing is, in some of the earliest versions, though, the dwarf and the halfling could only be a fighter. Now, this did change later with the thief class, which you got, in original Dungeons & Dragons, the little beige books, and in advanced Dungeons & Dragons. But I think the idea was, well, if dwarves and halflings can only be fighters anyways, let's get rid of that unnecessary complexity and just make dwarf and halfling a class. Now, elf, the idea behind the elf was they could be a fighter and a magic user. Here, they just straight out, that's what an elf is. They have the abilities of both. So they turn the races into classes. A lot of people love that. A lot of people don't, honestly, and I understand why. But that's the point of that, or that's what that means here. Intelligence is the ability to learn and remember knowledge, the ability to solve problems. Characters with an intelligence score of 13 or above should consider the classes of magic user or elf. Wisdom, the word wisdom refers to inspiration, intuition, common sense, and shrewdness. Wisdom aids in solving problems when intelligence is not enough. Boy, ain't that the truth. A character with a wisdom score of 13 or greater should consider the class of cleric. Dexterity is a measure of speed and agility. A character with a high dexterity score is good with his hands and has a good sense of balance. A character with a dexterity score of 13 or greater should consider the classes of thief and halfling. Constitution is a combination of health and endurance, the ability to hold up under pressure. It directly influences every class, possibly changing the number of hit points a character has. Constitution is never a prime requisite. Charisma is a combination of appearance, personal charm, and leadership ability. It helps the DM decide exactly how a monster will react to a player character. It also affects the number of retainers a character can hire, see page B21, and the morale, attitude, see B27, of these hirelings. Charisma is never a prime requisite. And again, this is another important point of old D&D. How a monster reacts to a player character. The attitude early on was not an assumption that as soon as characters and monsters meet, they're fighting. Didn't always work that way. And you did have reaction rolls. And the idea was that players could actually negotiate with monsters, and try to help get them to help take down another group of monsters or what have you. So it was a little more than that. One of the complaints people have with later versions of D&D is, well, it's too deadly. It's too deadly. It's too deadly. Well, you weren't supposed to fight every single thing you met. So it wasn't necessarily too deadly in the old days. If it came down to fighting, the attitude from a lot of old timers was, as soon as you're starting to roll dice, you've kind of already lost. You're supposed to be figuring out better ways to get to that treasure that is your goal. So here we have ability score adjustments. And so, for example, strength may be lowered by magic users in order to raise intelligence, and by clerics in order to raise wisdom. So you can't just flip the points around however you want. There's sort of rules. And it does say when adjusting abilities, no score may be lowered Below 9, when an adjustment is made, a prime requisite ability will be raised 1 point for every 2 points that the adjusted ability is lowered. So a wizard could take their strength down by 2 points to increase their intelligence by 1. Now, intelligence can be lowered by fighters, dwarves, halflings, thieves, and clerics. Wisdom may be lowered by magic users, fighters, dwarves, elves, halflings, and thieves in order to raise a prime requisite for their class. Dexterity may not be lowered, though it can be raised if it is a prime requisite. That would be, for your thief, for example. Constitution and charisma may not be raised or lowered. Then we get hit points and hit dice. Number of points of damage you can take in combat. You get the idea. We learn how to roll the hit points. So each time a character earns enough experience points to gain a new level, the character gets to roll for more hit points. I think most of us understand how that works. It says here, first level characters may easily be killed in battle. As an option, the DM may allow a player character to roll again if the player has rolled a 1 or 2 for the number of hit points at first level only. Okay, so we already have this sort of creeping in, the sort of, okay, if we're going to have this game be aimed more towards kids, kids sometimes don't react well to this stuff, so maybe we need to make a couple concessions here. So here we get the bonuses and penalties due to abilities. If it's a prime requisite, higher scores, you get a plus percentage bonus to your experience points. Low scores, you get a negative. So if you're a fighter, you probably don't want to have a strength of like 5. That's going to be pretty stupid. And it would also be kind of stupid just in terms of the game. For strength, you get bonuses or penalties to hit, damage, and opening doors. Okay, that's on page B21. Intelligence. Interesting here, use of language. Intelligence score 3 has trouble with speaking, cannot read or write. 4 to 5, cannot read or write common. Common would be a language. 6 to 8, can write simple common words. 9 to 12, reads and writes native languages, usually 2. 13 to 15, reads and writes native languages plus 1 added language. 16 to 17, plus 2 additional languages. 18 plus 3. Okay. So there is a section on languages that we'll go to in a little bit, but I do like that it also covers whether or not you're literate. So, you have a little bit of basic literacy with a 6 to 8. So obviously, when we're talking about the real Middle Ages, that's making people an awful lot more literate than they actually would have been. But that's okay because it's a fantasy game. Wisdom, we get a bonus or a penalty on magic-based saving throws. So does not apply to saving throws versus dragon breath. They might or might not affect saving throws versus death ray or poison, depending on whether the attack is magical. These adjustments do affect a saving throw versus turn to stone, versus wands, and versus a rod, staff, or spell. Dexterity has a adjustment to missile fire, which means, ranged attacks, to armor class, and to initiative. Now, this is one of the things that some people who like the much earlier versions, they go, well, dexterity gives you a lot of potential bonuses if it's high. Now, in the old days, it was not a prime requisite for anybody. All right. Well, now it's a prime requisite for thieves. So thieves get a lot of cool stuff, plus a bonus to earned experience with that high dexterity. Okay. But in all honesty, with strength, you get the hit damage and opening doors. The wisdom is pretty useful too, as far as saving against magic spells. And there's a lot of that stuff. And the intelligence, again, if you're playing the game where you're trying to negotiate with monsters, being able to talk to, kobolds, goblins, and dragons could be very valuable. So that could be great for your wizard. Constitution affects hit points. Charisma gives you an adjustment to reactions, maximum number of retainers, and the morale of the retainers. So high charisma, you can have a bunch of retainers, and they're going to fight for you a little bit longer than other characters or other players' retainers will. Here we get the character class tables. That's a beautiful thing when you can sum all this stuff up on one page. We get the clerics, the level. Of course, we have titles here: acolyte, adept, priest, or priestess. How many experience points it takes. Hit dice, 1 die 6, 2 die 6, 3 die 6. Spells, again, none at first level, one at first level. One first level spell and then 2 first level spells when you get to third. Here we have clerics versus undead, skeletons, zombies, ghouls, wights, and wraiths. Now that's going to be expanded for the expert set as they added more monsters and higher levels. Dwarves, the level titles unfortunately are not all that much fun. They're basically the same as the fighter, but they put dwarven in front of it. So dwarven veteran, dwarven warrior, dwarven sword master. They get 1d8 for their hit points. Elves get 1d6, and they get sort of a combo of the fighters and magic users. Veteran medium, warrior seer, and sword master conjurer. Kind of fun. Fighters, veteran, warrior, sword master. 1d8 for hit dice. Halflings, 1d6 for hit dice. Magic users, 1d4 for hit dice. And thieves, also 1d4. So thieves are really designed in these earlier versions to try to stay out of combat. That's why they have things like a backstab. That's to help them. Okay. We also get the thieves' abilities. Open locks, find or remove traps, pick pockets, move silently, climb sheer surfaces, hide in shadows, and hear noise. All right. These are percentage abilities, except for hear noise, which is a roll on 1d6. I think the reason is because other characters can also roll on 1d6 to hear noises. In their case, they need a 1. In this, for the thief, it starts as a 1 or 2 and then rises up to a 1 to 3. So here we get the explanations of the abilities. Open locks may only be tried once per lock. Can't try again until you get to another level of experience. And you notice they don't get real heavily into this. You either open the lock or you don't open the lock. It doesn't need to be that complicated. Find or remove traps is a double ability. So you use this to find a trap, and then you use it to remove the trap. You don't do both at once, and you can only attempt once per trap. Pickpockets may be risky. If the DM rolls a number greater than twice the chance of success, the thief's attempt is seen. The DM should determine the reaction of any NPC who sees the thief's failed attempt. So, for example, pickpockets at first level, you have a 20% chance. Okay, so you roll a 1 to 20 on your percentile dice. You're okay. You succeeded. If you roll a 21 or higher, you failed. But if you roll a 41 or higher, it means you not only failed, but you were seen, you were detected, and there's a good chance somebody's going to try to kill you, especially if it's another player. Move silently will always seem successful to the thief. However, the DM will know, based on the percentage roll, whether the thief's movement is actually heard by nearby enemies and should have them take action if necessary. Now, this is another place where I think in modern games, it gets a little more complicated than it needs to, because there's an attitude that, well, only thieves can move silently. Nobody else can sneak around. Well, think in terms of what it actually says. Move silently. I think what they're going for is you move without making a sound at all. If you're successful, there is no chance the other monsters, what have you, will actually hear you. Okay. If you have, say, a fighter trying to do it, he's trying to sneak, he's trying to be quiet. Okay, you understand what he's trying to do. That's the goal. But then the monster maybe gets to roll like a hear noise chance to actually hear him when he's doing it. So I think the idea, especially as you know, and some monsters are going to have very good hearing. I think that's kind of the idea behind it. No, it doesn't mean the rest of people can't sneak. This dude does it without making a single noise. And then we have, now this is interesting, climb sheer surfaces. Here it says climb steep surfaces. I think they meant sheer, and I think they messed up. So again, the idea here is it doesn't mean the thief is the only one who can climb walls. Anybody can try to climb a normal wall. This dude can climb sheer surfaces. Like, there don't seem to be any handholds. You know, not quite like Spider-Man, but you get the idea. And I think some of that comes from the Conan stories and his ability to climb. Hide in shadows here cannot be done unless the thief remains perfectly still, not moving or attacking. As with move silently above, the thief always thinks that he or she is successful In the attempt, only the DM knows for sure. And again, hide in shadows. Anybody can try to hide behind a barrel or hide behind something else. The thief can just melt into the shadows. And if you're talking about a dungeon, there's going to be a lot of shadows. Now, the question, of course, is, does that work against infrared vision? Well, I don't know. But I would say, well, yeah, because you're talking about dungeons, and most monsters are assumed to have infravision. So if it doesn't work against that, it's not really very useful at all. But that could be argued over between players and the DM. Hear noises rolled on 1d6 may apply to listening at doors or hearing something coming from any direction, such as a wandering monster. To use this ability, the thief must tell the DM that he or she is being quiet and trying to hear noise. During a battle, however, there is too much noise for anyone to hear anything unusual. So once again, the suggestion is that, yeah, sometimes thieves are going to be scouting ahead in a dungeon all by themselves, which is very dangerous. But that's why they can move silently, hide in shadows, and hear noises. But sometimes they're going to have to leave the other characters behind. So here we get the explanations of the different character classes that goes in depth to what their special abilities are. We have clerics. We talk about turning undead. We have dwarves. Dwarves are short, stocky demi-humans, about 4 feet tall. All dwarves have long beards. They weigh about 150 pounds. Their skin is earth-colored, and their hair is dark brown, gray, or black. Stubborn but practical, dwarves love hearty meals and strong drink. And so you see, to some degree, they are sort of world-building. It's kind of assumed in the game. Now, of course, a dungeon master could change that stuff. All of his dwarves could be, 3 feet tall and weigh 200 pounds, and they all have blonde or red hair, whatever you want to do with them. But it does sort of give you that. And they do mention the infravision here, heat sensing sight, which allows them to see 60 feet in the dark. Okay, expert miners, etc. And you talk about like being able to find slanting passages, traps, shifting walls, and new construction. So some of the idea there is that, this is actually useful when you're going into a dungeon. If you think about the different dungeon levels, that it gets more dangerous as you go deeper. Being able as a dwarf to figure out how deep you are could tell you, maybe you've gone down this slanted passage and you were on the first level of the dungeon and you think, well, we took the slanted passage down. Now we're on the second level of the dungeon. Well, maybe you're on the fourth level of the dungeon. Maybe it was a little steeper and a little longer than anybody realized. And, maybe this is a dangerous place and you don't want to be there. Maybe you want to go back. You got to think about that. Shifting walls, things like that. This is a useful ability. Unless you're playing D&D as nothing but a miniatures war game, and you're just fighting everything you see. Some of the game is about trying to, like I said, get around monsters, get around traps, find other exits, entrances, whatever. So then we get the elves, slender, graceful demi-humans with delicate features and slightly pointed ears. They're 5 to 5.5 feet tall and weigh about 120 pounds. They can be dangerous opponents, able to fight with any weapon and use magical spells as well. But prefer to spend their time feasting and frolicking in wooded glades. They rarely visit the cities of men, fascinated by magic, etc. So the cool thing about these guys is they're fighter magic users. They advance to a maximum of 10th level. Okay, that's another thing. I didn't bring that up with dwarves, but yeah, level limits for demi-humans. That's because they get a little more abilities than the other classes. Now, there's another way that you can handle that, and they actually do to some degree. Because you'll notice fighters need like 2,000 to get to second level, whereas dwarves need 2,200. Okay, halflings need 2. Elves need 4,000. Okay, it kind of combines. But I think the idea was to make sure that humans were still attractive characters to play. That's something that has eroded over time, so that you don't find too many human characters, at least from what I hear, in modern games. They may use shields and can wear any type of armor and may fight with any kind of weapon. They can also cast spells like a magic user and use the same spell list. A character must have an intelligence of 9 or greater to be an elf. So yeah, here they make it very clear they can wear any kind of armor for casting their spells, unless they're going to talk about that differently under the spell section. So we'll have to see. We got our fighters, pretty basic dudes. Great class, though, when you get right down to it. We got our halflings, small, good-natured demi-humans, averaging only 3 feet tall in height and weighing about 60 pounds. Now, keep that in mind, too. When you hear 3 feet, you got to remember that halflings are the size of toddlers. 3 feet is just not real high. I mean, dwarves, not much more. And here you see like the picture of the halfling, and I do like that he's thin, almost elf looking. And I think the idea obviously is that they're trying to get away from the Hobbit look, to avoid getting sued. This maybe is an elf, although if she is, that means these dudes are kind of short. That could be an elf, though. That's about the right height for an elf. So that might just be the human. Human and magic user. That's probably the human cleric, human fighter. There's your elf. There's your dwarf. There's your halfling, because he does have the cross on his necklace, or amulet, if you want to call it that. That would be obviously his holy symbol. So then we have our magic users, and they're basically all about casting the spells. And we got the thieves. Talks about their special abilities a little bit. When striking unnoticed from behind, a thief gains a bonus of +4 on the hit rolls and inflicts twice the normal amount of damage. A thief's training includes learning how to pick pockets, climb steep surfaces. They say steep again there. Move silently, hide in shadows, open locks with a set of lockpicks or burglar's tools, remove small traps such as poison needles, and how to hear noises better than other humans. Okay. Character alignment. Boy, this, a lot of debate over this kind of stuff. They keep it a little simpler here. I think most people from my generation think of this. There's chaotic, there's lawful, there's neutral. And that's actually a really good way to look at it. Neutral is just whatever. Yeah, whatever. He's Gen X, basically. Chaotic will go out of their way to do something rotten. Lawful will go out of his way to stop that from happening. Neutral just stays out of it. They're going to do what they're going to do. But we do get the law or lawful belief that everything should follow in order and that obeying rules is the natural way of life. Lawful creatures will try to tell the truth, obey laws, and care about all living things. Lawful characters always try to keep their promises. They will try to obey laws as long as such laws are fair and just, which means, no, you don't have to be stupid about things. If a choice must be made between the benefit of a group or an individual, a lawful character will usually choose the group. All right. Chaos is the opposite, belief that life is random and that chance and luck rule the world. Everything happens by accident and nothing can be predicted. Laws are made to be broken as long as a person can get away with it. It is not important to keep promises, and lying and telling the truth are both useful. To a chaotic creature, the individual is the most important of all things. Selfishness is the normal way of life, and the group is not important. Chaotics often act on sudden desires and whims. And neutrality, is sort of in the middle. And some, of course, people will do it. Here it says a neutral character is most interested in personal survival. Such characters believe in their own wits and abilities rather than luck. They tend to return the treatment they receive from others. Neutral characters will join a party if they think it is in their own best interest, but will not be overly helpful unless there's some sort of profit in it. Neutral behavior may be considered good or evil, or neither, depending on the situation. We get some examples here as well. Alignment languages, something I really dig that, again, has tended to fall away, but it's the idea of, here we'll read what they say. A secret language of passwords, hand signals, and other body motions. Okay, so you're not having long conversations in an alignment language. That's not the idea behind all of this. Player characters, intelligent monsters, will always know their alignment languages. They will also recognize when another alignment language is being spoken, but will not understand it. They're not written down, nor may they be learned unless a character changes alignment. When this happens, the character forgets the old alignment language and starts using the new one immediately. Well, that makes it sound kind of magical. So very interesting. But the idea, again, is for you to be able to determine who you can trust and who you can't. Cost of weapons and armor. Always loved this image. Again, this was my first role-playing game book. So it really hit me hard. I'd never seen something like that before, and I just thought it was so freaking cool. But we get the different weapons, cost and gold pieces. We get the armor class. We get various kinds of equipment that you might need. We get the list of all the languages, and there are 20 of them, which means you could roll randomly if you needed to. Inheritance. If the DM wishes, a player may name an heir to inherit his or her worldly possessions upon the death of the character. Now, when we do, authorities take 10% in taxes before giving the inheritance to the heir. This heir must always be a newly rolled up first level character. This inheritance should only occur once per player. So think about that, though. You've been adventuring, you got a 5th level fighter, and he's got a +1 sword or a +2 sword or something like that. He can hand that down to the first level character he has to roll up, along with his wealth. So, okay, you're starting over at first level, but conceivably you have better armor, you have a better weapon, you already, you can get more equipment, you could hire more retainers. It's going to help, balance things out a little bit, even though now you're first level and before you had a 5th level dude in the game. Hopeless characters, this is for when has more than one very low 3 to 6 ability score, such as a fighter with very low dexterity and constitution. The DM may declare the character to be not suited for dangerous adventure, and the player may be allowed to roll up a new character in place of the hopeless one. Now this, though, implies you roll up what you roll up, and that's what you're going to play. You don't get to just keep on rolling characters and rolling characters and rolling characters until you get exactly what you want. All right, character sheet here gives you an example. For Morgan Ironwolf, a lawful fighter. Now, one of the interesting things about this game, let me make sure I didn't go past that image already. I don't believe that I did. Okay. So it's probably along in here somewhere. There we go. There was an assumption by pretty much all of us, because it says here, according to the chart above, Morgan Ironwolf could move at 60 feet per turn. This was Morgan Ironwolf. And yes, all of us guys were in love with her. Thank you, Jeff D. Now, to the best of my knowledge, that was not intentional at all. And most people will say that Morgan Ironwolf was actually supposed to be a male character. But see, at the time, we had Morgan Fairchild, we had Morgan Brittany, we had a lot of actresses named Morgan. Okay, so maybe we assumed that at that point in time, it was a girl's name. Hey, we were kids. What did we know? So next section is spells, clerical spells. They're done by level, which I'll be honest with you could be kind of a pain in the butt, especially when you get into the expert set, because you have to remember the level of all the spells to look them up instead of just putting them all in alphabetical order. You notice we just have range and duration. You also notice the little asterisk for reversible spells. The idea is that chaotic clerics typically could not cast healing spells, and the lawful ones could not cast damaging spells. That was kind of the, clerics were the initial sort of fighting spellcaster, but they felt since they could wear any kind of armor and use pretty good weapons, they needed to be blunted a little bit. So that was what that was all about. Then we get the magic user and elf spells because they share the spell list. First, second, third, etc. We'll look at magic missile here because that's a big spell. Range 150 feet, duration 1 turn. Wait a minute, 1 turn, isn't it instantaneous? Hold on, maybe it's not entirely. A magic missile is a glowing arrow created and shot by magic, which does 2 to 7, 1d6 plus 1 points of damage. Now you notice they always, back in the day, would give you the range. So one of the things we got good at as kids with D&D was figuring out what dice and bonuses we had to use to get those ranges. We got real fast at it. So 2 to 7 points of damage to any creature it strikes. It will automatically hit any visible target. For every 5 levels the caster has gained, he or she may shoot 2 more missiles when casting the spell. Example, a 6th level magic user may cast 3 missiles. These may be shot at one target, or the caster may choose to cast the missiles at different targets. Now, what does the duration mean? The idea was that you could go in to a dungeon, and maybe, you know there's going to be danger pretty soon. You cast the spell. Those little magic missiles will float like above your head or wherever for up to 1 turn, which I believe, we haven't gotten to time yet, but I believe that'll be 10 minutes. Now, if you haven't shot them in 10 minutes, they're gone. And you've lost the spell because, of course, in these versions, you memorize spells, you cast them, they're gone. That's the idea. But you had a little time to cast them, so you could prepare magic user or magic missile before you went into a combat, if you knew it was really coming. And that way, once you get in there, you can start launching your missiles at people and not waste time on a spell. Of course, potentially it could be ruined for you, but you get the idea. So we got the 2nd level spells, and we got the 3rd level spells. And 3rd level, of course, is where we get the... Oh, no, I'm sorry. We only get 2nd level. I'm sorry. We only get to 2nd level in this one. But what they do for you here, they give you a little bit of information on higher level cleric and magic user spells, because you could be fighting higher level enemies. So they give you, for level 4, clerics have 4d6 hit dice, 2 first level and 1 second level spells. You get the same thing for them. And you do, in fact, get the 3rd level magic user spells and the 2nd level cleric spells. So here's Fireball, range 240 feet, duration instantaneous. The spell creates a missile of fire that explodes into a ball of fire 40 feet in diameter when it strikes a target. The fireball will cause 1d6 points of fire damage per level of the caster to all creatures within this area. If a victim of a fireball saves versus spells, the spell will only do half damage. Okay. The adventure. All right. You get something on party size and composition, on organizing party. So this is stuff that's going to be very useful for not only the players, but for the dungeon master as well. Especially, again, this is the basic set, so you have to assume a lot of people playing this have never done something like this before. Time in D&D Adventures is given in turns of 10 minutes. Okay, I was right. A turn is not a measure of real time, but is a measure of how much a character can do within a given amount of time. A character may explore and map an area equal to his or her movement rate in 1 turn. It also takes a turn for the character to search a 10 by 10 area, for a thief to check an item for traps, to rest, or to load a bag with treasure. Something to think about here is there's a logistics element to D&D. Time, distance, etc. You need to keep track of how long these things are taking because of random monsters. So how much time do you want to spend searching a room, right? If it's big enough, and remember in the old days, on the maps, each square was usually 10 by 10. So if you have a good sized room, it could take you quite a bit of time. And if you're making wandering monster checks every turn, it could be a little dangerous to be doing that. We get movement, able to move 120 feet, so they're making sure you understand what that little ditty bop there is. In 1 turn when exploring a dungeon. This is only a base movement rate used to compare the speed of the characters with the monsters which are encountered and determine both encounter and running speeds. A base movement rate of 120 feet in 10 minutes may seem slow, but it assumes that the players are mapping carefully, searching, and trying to be quiet. It also takes into account the generally dark and dingy conditions of the dungeon in which characters are adventuring. I like that they call that out very directly there. A lot of that's helping, right? Again, new people to the game. It's kind of giving you the atmosphere of the whole thing within the rules and why the rules are what they are. And of course, you can maybe move faster. Resting. After moving for 5 turns, the party must rest for 1 turn. 1 turn in 6, one each hour of the adventure must be spent resting. If characters do not rest, they have a penalty of -1 on all to hit and damage rolls until they do rest. And you could again see how that could work its way into an adventure. They're being pursued through the dungeon by something terrible. They got to keep moving. But since they're not able to rest, their ability to fight is getting lower and lower. Can they get out of the dungeon in time before they're caught and they're really in trouble. You get some scale movement here in terms of using miniatures and things of that nature. Here we get character encumbrance, your normal move, your encounter or combat movement, your running movement. Okay. All of the weight is measured in coins, 10 coins to the pound was the idea. These would be really, really big, heavy coins. And I know that I think I read, God, I don't know, it might have been Gygax even talking about that. He goes, yeah, it's a fantasy game. We don't want to have realistic coins that were like little and super thin. These are big, chunky, like doubloons that we're talking about. You want something that's cool. You don't want realism here. Okay. So we have the encumbrance table, the weight of all the different kinds of armors and weapons and things of that nature. And then we get the example with Morgan Ironwolf. We learn about light and how long torches will burn and how much light they'll give out. We learn about infravision, the ability to see heat patterns. Most living things give off heat. To infravision, warm things are bright, cool things are gray, and cold things are black. Infravision is useless in normal or magical light. Infravision cannot be used to read without light. All non-human monsters have infravision. All right, something to keep in mind. And again, if you want to have somebody doing some scouting who has infravision, they need to get away from the rest of the party because the torches will screw it up. We learn about normal doors and how to open them, secret doors, listening at doors. We get the stuff on retainers, which is a big part of old D&D. You were supposed to bring in a little army with you into these dungeons, and weren't necessarily supposed to get out with that army. And that was, these men-at-arms may not make it out, but they were there to absorb a little damage for you. There's rules for hiring. There's rules for reactions. It's kind of a lot, actually, but it's sort of a fun little mini game of going into a town or something and putting up, notices you want to hire people, etc. We get a small bit here on traps. And of course, any character has a 1 in 6 chance of finding a trap when searching for one in the correct area. Any dwarf has a 2 in 6 chance. This does not apply to magical traps, such as a sleep trap. Checking a specific area for a trap will take 1 full turn. All right. So dwarves a little better at it than everybody else. We also learn up here, the trap will be sprung on a roll of 1 to 2. The DM must check for each character passing the spot until the trap is either sprung or safely passed by all. Now that's kind of a cool concept because it means you're walking along, nobody notices it, but maybe the trap doesn't go off. You think that passageway is safe. And then you're going back out, or you're maybe running through that passage, and you find out it wasn't safe after all. We get wandering monsters, okay? The DM may choose wandering monsters at random using the wandering monsters table in part 8. Now, it doesn't, I think, say here how often you're supposed to check. And that might vary. They might give that to us later on. We have the rules for giving experience points, and of course, experience points based on defeating monsters, dividing XP. Treasure is divided by the party, but the DM handles all the XP awards. At the end of the adventure, the DM totals the XP from all treasures recovered plus all monsters defeated, and then divides the total by the number of surviving characters, both player characters and NPCs in the party. Okay, so that's actually kind of cool because it means like if you're the only one out, you not only get more treasure, you get more experience points. So, if you're playing a thief and you and a magic user are the only ones who are getting, maybe an accident happens. The magic user doesn't get out after all. You never know. That's why you don't adventure with chaotics. Maximum XP. A character should never be given enough XP in a single adventure to advance more than 1 level of experience. And then we saw that in the old one too. Here we get an example with Bork, a 2nd level fighter. So you notice that player character sheet earlier in it was Bork. 3,000 XP, gains 10 XP on an adventure, giving him a total of 4210. Over 4,001, the amount needed to become a 3rd level. Bork has 11 hit points and a constitution score of 50. So you get the whole idea on leveling up. Again, one of the beautiful things about this book is you can use this plus the expert set, and you can play D&D for the rest of your life. And it's a nice, simple, well laid out set of rules. Really a beautiful thing. So here we get the encounter. All right. We get time in encounters. We learned that each combat round is 10 seconds long. Now, in my last one, I did the little combat with the He-Man figures to give you an idea of how long 10 seconds. I think it was maybe 10 in that one. I'd have to look back again. But a lot of people think that each round of combat, you attack with your sword means you go, ha, you make one attack. It's 10 seconds, right? There's a lot of time. I mean, think of, here we get 10 seconds for you. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000, 6, 1,000, 7, 1,000, 8, 1,000, 9, 1,000, 10. A lot of movement happens in 10 seconds. A lot of swings. So when you're saying I'm going to attack this round, it doesn't mean you're stabbing once with a sword or what have you. It means there's a lot of movement. But your goal is to do some damage to the other guy, to take him down a peg, to bring him or her or it closer to death. That's the idea. And if you want to see my brilliant little combat with the He-Man figures, go watch the other basic set rules delve that I did. It's on my channel. So we get the time, we get the order of play. Now this changes from edition to edition. So DM rolls, so this is for one game turn. Okay, so here we got it down. The DM rolls for Wandering Monsters. Roll a 1d6, page B53. The party moves, enters room, listens, and searches. If monsters are not encountered, the turn ends. If monsters are encountered, the DM rolls for the number appearing. So for Wandering Monsters, that's done right then and there. The DM rolls 2d6 to check the distance between the monsters and the party. The DM rolls 1d6 for both the monsters and the party to check for surprise. The DM and the party roll 1d6 for initiative to see who moves first. So that's side versus side, not individual initiative. The DM rolls 2d6 for the monster reaction. The party and the monsters react. If both sides are willing to talk, the DM rolls for monster reactions and initiative as necessary. If one side runs away, the DM should check the chance of evasion and pursuit. We're going to see that a little later here. If combat begins, the DM should use the combat sequence to handle combat. So really nicely laid out for you, and we get explanations of number appearing, of distance. So a monster seen coming around a corner 20 feet away, for example, is encountered at that distance. If it is uncertain how far away the monster is, roll 2d6 and multiply the result by 10. The resulting number is the distance in feet away that it is. So if it's obvious, you don't have to roll for it. Understand that's a big part of old school gaming. You don't have to roll the dice for everything. That's why you got a referee to figure things out without having to roll dice. Makes the games go a lot quicker. You got rules here for surprise. You got initiative. You got pair combat. The DM may choose to roll initiative for each character and monster he or she is fighting instead of for each side. If this is done, characters' dexterity scores are used to adjust the initiative die rolls. Okay, so you can do individual if you want. Again, I think for newer players, doing it for one side versus the other side allows for better, coordination. And again, if it's a big combat, you probably really want to do that. We get monster actions and reactions. You roll 2d6. On a 2, it's immediate attack. On 12, it's enthusiastic friendship with differences in their encounter movement. Running, evasion. So what are your chances of getting away, and pursuit? By the way, that sword, man, I can't tell you how many characters I had that had a sword that looked like that. I would trace it off of this page because I thought that was the coolest looking thing I'd ever seen in my life. Let's do a close-up view of that hilt. Man, I thought that was cool. Okay. Hey, I'm a nerd. I can't help it. It's just how I am. We get the combat sequence here. Each side rolls for initiative, morale checks, movement per round, missile fire combat, magic spells after missile fire, melee or hand-to-hand combat is what's done last. Okay, so you go through each of these. So you do a morale check, and that's going to be done for the side that wins initiative and then the one that lost. Then you do the movement. Then you do the missile fire combat for each side. Then you do magic spells for each side. Then you do melee or hand-to-hand combat for each side. So the side that wins the initiative acts first, and this is the order in which things are done. Morale check, movement, missile fire, magic spells, then melee, then the other side does it. The DM handles any surrenders, retreats, etc. as they occur, and you repeat these steps as many times as you need to. You get defensive movement. Fighting withdrawal may be used in combat if the defender wishes to back up slowly. Movement backwards is limited to half the normal movement rate per round or less. There must be enough room to back up, etc. Retreat is when the opponents get to attack you as you run away. They get a +2 to all hit rolls, and the defender is not allowed to make a return attack. So, again, you got to think a little bit of tactics involved. You get all the rules here for the attacking. Spell attacks will automatically hit the chosen targets if within range or the area of effect. There is a chance that a character may escape all or part of the effects of certain spells. This chance is called a saving throw. It's a combination of luck and experience, and so we're going to get that a little bit later. Here's the rules for damage. Healing wounds. Wounds may be cured in 2 ways, by resting or magic. To cure wounds by resting, the wounded creature must relax in a safe space and may do nothing but rest. Each full day of complete rest will restore 1 to 3 hit points. Roll 1d6. 1 or 2 indicates 1. 3 or 4 indicates 2. 5 or 6 indicates 3. Explaining how that works. If a day's rest is interrupted for any reason, no healing will take place. Okay. Different method also can be with magic. Cure light wounds, for example. We get missile fire. They tell you how dexterity works with that. Magical bonuses, etc. We get the oil and we get the holy water. So they explain how that's going to work for you. Pretty much like we've seen before. We get, of course, the saving throws. Now, I talked about this at more length than the other one, but understand that part of the idea initially was that the easiest stuff to save against was the deadliest stuff, so that it's a little easier for you to survive stuff that's going to just take your character right out. Stuff that's really, not great for your character, but may not eliminate them immediately, is going to be a little harder to save against, and so on. And you also will notice that, like, for example, elves and magic users are going to be a little bit better against, magic spells and stuff than other characters are. Okay, so there's a little bit of that, but that's the idea. Death ray or poison, magic wands, paralysis or turned to stone, dragon breath, rods, staves, or spells. Now that is a little different from some of the other editions. Rods, staves, and I think wands was once one thing. Here wands are different. It can change from edition to edition. Something you want to pay attention to if you're trying this for the first time. We then get our melee combat. Here is our character and monster attacks. So attackers level. Now you go, well, wait a minute. Why doesn't it separate stuff out between fighters and blah, blah, blah? That's because 1st to 3rd level, it's pretty much the same for everybody, right? Fighters get better weapons and better armor. They're not necessarily better at that point at taking people, at hitting, or actually we'll say causing damage than say a magic user. Now that will change as they gain levels. We get missile fire ranges, variable weapon damage. So there was a point where every weapon does 1d6 points of damage. That was the attitude. You go, well, how does that make sense? Well, then why do I want to have a sword versus a mace? Well, again, you got to think when you're playing the game, there's things you can do with a sword or with a spear or with a mace that you can't do with other weapons because of the shape, because of the size. So think about that as well when you're just playing the game, that don't just necessarily pick weapons because of the damage. What else can you do with that weapon? How might it be useful for you when you're trying to survive a dungeon? Now, morale is optional, but it's basically a chance that your retainers or the monsters might run from a fight. I think it's a good rule to use. At a minimum, it can end a combat a little bit quicker before it really takes a toll on the player characters. Might help them survive a little bit. We get an example of combat here. There's just a funny little bit here. The largest of the hobgoblins shouts in his language, "Go away, you're not allowed in this room." It's okay. Gary sent us Silverleaf answers. Huh? The hobgoblin wittily responds. All right. Obviously talking about Gary Gygax. So then we get the section on monsters, and it runs down armor class, hit dice, how this stuff works, their movement, special attacks, poison. Poison is the bane of all characters. If a character is hit with a poisoned attack and misses his or her saving throw versus poison, the character will usually die. And now in the D&D expert rules, there's a magical way to cure a poisoned creature. You get paralysis. Energy drain. Oh boy, a lot of people hate energy drain. Look, energy drain is scary as hell. That's why it's usually possessed by the undead. Because if you actually saw some shambling dead body coming at you in real life, you'd be scared to hell. In a game, when you got a high-level fighter, I can take this guy out. Okay, but he could start knocking down your levels if you don't take him out real quick. Now, that's scary to a player, as well as to the character. It's a very effective thing. Yeah, some people don't like it, but you know what? D&D is a game for adults. They say it right on the cover. Adults 10 and over. If you want the kiddie stuff, go play Pretty Pretty Princess. You're not ready for this level of adventure. We got Charm. A character who fails to save versus spells against a charm attack, such as from a harpy, is unable to make any decisions. Acid, etc. So it doesn't have to explain it for each monster. It kind of gives you a nice thing here. We get number appearing, how that works, their morale, their treasure type, their alignment. So let's run through this real quick. Like, we're going to mostly look at cool pictures. So here we have the white ape, probably inspired a little bit from Barsoom, bats, bears, giant beetles. There's a few different kinds of them. By the way, different from the giant beetles in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Berserkers, boars, bugbears, carrion crawlers, one of the all-time classics, comes from the little plastic dinosaur package that Gygax had. We get great cats, including saber-toothed tigers, cave locusts, giant centipedes, doppelgangers, always fun. Here's the dragons, white, black, green, blue, red, and gold. So you get the polychromatic dudes and the gold dragons, but not the other lawful ones that you'll have in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. This shows you what the different weapons look like. Cone, line, cloud. Okay. Dragons are intelligent, and some dragons can speak dragon in common. Percentage chance of that. Percentage chance of them being asleep, which is very important. And thank again to the Hobbit, and sneaking in on the dragon. And is it asleep? Is it not? You get the idea. We get driver ants. We get dwarf. We get elf. Giant ferrets. Gargoyles. Gelatinous cubes. Ghouls. Gnolls. Gnomes. Not a race you can play at this point. For every 20 gnomes, one will be a leader with 11 hit points who fights as a 2-hit dice monster. So you always got that with all the different monsters. We see that for the goblin. In the goblin lair lives a goblin king with 15 hit points who fights as a 3-hit dice monster, etc. Grey ooze, green slime, scared the crap out of us as kids because it turns what it touches into green slime. Dude, we had so much green slime in our stupid dungeons. We were convinced it was the way to go. Halflings, harpies, hobgoblins. Love those dudes. Insect swarms. Killer bees. Oh, come on, man. It's coming into the 70s. Killer bees. They're on SNL. They're everywhere. Kobolds. Again, love this picture of the kobold. This is the first for me. So a lot of the stuff is like, that's what kobolds look like. Because that's the first thing I ever saw that was called a kobold. The living statues. Notice we don't have golems here. We have the living statues, crystal, iron, and rock. They're actually pretty darn cool. We have giant lizards, lycanthropes, were-rat, werewolf, were-bear, were-boar, were-tiger, and were-bear. A later one is going to have, I think maybe it's in the expert set, where you get devil swine, which are another cool one. They look like actual pigs instead of boars. And anyways, lizard man, here's our Medusa. Also a medium. You go medium rather than a small or a large. No. Remember, that is a title for first level magic users. So they actually just give you stats for a first level magic user to use as a monster type. So you don't actually have to roll everything up for them if you don't want to. Minotaur, Mule, Neanderthal, or Caveman. Nobles. Yes, that would be a noble human. Normal humans, NPC party, Ochre Jelly, Ogre, Orc, Owl Bear, another one of the classics. The Pixie, here we have a Pixie taunting the very great Rust Monster. Now, the Rust Monster's not fair. It destroys, yeah, I know, it destroys your equipment. That creates a challenge for you. And also, stay away from Rust Monsters. That was a fun opportunity for, like, the magic user in the party and the thief to do some combat against that thing, you know, instead of the fighter just rushing in and doing it. The Robber Fly were very cool. Rock Baboons, the Shadows, I believe, had the energy drain. Oh, no, they drain 1 point of strength in addition to doing normal damage. Of course, we have normal and giant rats. Giant shrews, could that be a reference to the movie? I certainly hope so. Shriekers look like giant mushrooms. We got skeletons, the classic Ray Harryhausen. Various kinds of snakes. We have various kinds of giant spiders, sprites, sturge, the Thule. Wait a minute, the Thule? What the heck is a Thule? A Thule is a magical combination of a ghoul, a hobgoblin, and a troll. See D&D Expert Rules. That's for the troll. Except when very close, Thules look exactly like hobgoblins, and they are sometimes found as part of the bodyguard of a hobgoblin king. Now, the story apparently is there was a misprint for a ghoul, and they put a T instead. And so people are like, what's a Thule? So, hey, just make one up. And they did. And that's one of those things that is was always like in Dungeons & Dragons, not in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. There are certain monsters that were kind of exclusive in a way. And they didn't have to be, and you could certainly transport one to the other. But that's kind of how it worked. We got traitors. We got troglodytes again from Willingham. One of my favorite pictures. I love that so much. Undead, sea ghoul, skeleton, wight, or zombie. We got a veteran, so that's a first level fighter. Were creatures, sea lycanthropes. We got the wight. They did the energy drain. Wolves, normal, and dire. Yellow mold, and zombie. All right. It's a really legit list of monsters. You can do a lot in dungeons with those. And especially when you're talking gonzo dungeons, you're not so worried about ecology. You just kind of throw in what's fun. And it didn't bother us. I mean, again, we were kids, and maybe if we were adults, it would have. But it's like, it's a weird fantasy dungeon. There's a room with goblins. There's another room with troglodytes. They're not that far from each other. Whatever. It's cool. It's fun. Here we get treasure and the different treasure types. Thousands of copper, thousands of silver, thousands of electrum, thousands of gold, thousands of platinum, gems and jewelry, magic items. I think treasure type is a really interesting way to do that for building up what a horde looks like. Here's our magic items. You notice there's not a ton of them. The swords roll from a +1 up to a +2, including a sword -1 cursed. For other weapons and armor. And this is, I think, one of the important things about fighters being able to use swords. There's a sword +2, but there's no other weapon that's +2. So fighters, it's not a class ability per se, but it kind of is a class ability that they can get a more damaging weapon than anybody else. A long sword is going to be doing more damage than a mace already. Add +2, you get the idea. We get 8 potions, we get 8 scrolls, we get 6 rings, animal control, fire resistance, invisibility, protection +1, water walking, and weakness. Yeah, there's cursed items here. We get wand, staff, rod, miscellaneous magic items. It's a very tight list. And look, you could go find new magic items. You can make them up yourself. You could expand this list significantly without any trouble. And they are going to expand it in the expert set. Simple stuff for rolling up gems, jewelry. You get the idea. We learn about how to use magic items, how to identify magic items, charges. Many items will have a limited number of charges. Okay. Covers all that good stuff. How to use potions, how the rings work. You get the idea. We're not going to go super in depth on any of this stuff. Here we see a potion of gaseous form, cloud. You notice 2 little eyes on the cloud. I love that. Great art for the potions. Not a ton of art, but it was all really, really good. It It was really good, and it was very evocative. And here we have the Dungeon Master information. So this is where it's going to help you as a Dungeon Master, plan your game. And they give you sample scenarios, 1 to 10. You do notice when there's lists, they're generally in such a number that you can roll a dice for it. So we have exploring the unknown, investigating a chaotic outpost, recovering ruins, destroying an ancient evil, visiting a lost shrine, fulfilling a quest, escaping from enemies, rescuing prisoners, using a magic portal, finding a lost race. Very cool stuff. And they actually even give you some ideas about how that's going to work. Decide on a setting. Castle or tower, caves or cavern, abandoned mine, crypt or tomb, ancient temple, stronghold or town. Decide on special monsters to be used. Stock the dungeon, and they do give you some rolls for doing that randomly. For room contents, 1 to 2, monster, 3, trap, 4, special, 5 to 6, empty. Okay. Second roll, is there treasure? So there might be a monster, but maybe there's not going to be treasure. Sometimes you have to fight and you don't get anything out of it. Filling in final details, creating an NPC party. Very cool stuff. Here we go. Great image of a cobra going down a dungeon corridor. And if you think about most of these corridors in the old days were 10 foot wide, that's one hell of a big cobra. Here's wandering monster tables, so you don't have to make those up, but you can make them up, and you notice they get harder as you go deeper into the dungeon. They give you a whole example of dungeon design here. And you actually get the map for the Haunted Keep. So it's the East Tower rather than the West. There's the gatehouse, the goat house. Goat house would be a totally different thing. Very famous piece of art here so here's that tower you're exploring. And there's stairs that go down, and you could plot out all this other cool stuff for people to do in this little dungeon. Good stuff. And also, here's your map symbols, which, by the way, are still the map symbols that I use to this day. Even if I'm not doing something for Dungeons and Dragons, I always draw doors that way when I'm trying to do stuff, which will confuse some people, especially architects. We get a sample dungeon expedition with more. First level, let's see. This party includes 4 second-level characters and a first-level dwarf. Morgan Ironwood, here it does say, a female fighter, the caller. So, okay, they do call her out as female. Silverleaf, an elf. Frederick, a dwarf. Sister Rebecca, a cleric. And Black Dougal, a thief. Black Dougal. And I think this is where we get the very famous... Dun, 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 dun. We need to go back for that one. Dougal, I'm looking for traps on the box too. Okay, Frederick, I'm pushing, pulling, and trying to twist the lock, blah, blah, blah. Black Dougal, you find out that you missed a tiny discolored needle in the latch. Roll a saving throw versus poison, please. Dougal, rolling. Missed it. Dungeon Master. Black Dougal gasps, poison, and falls to the floor. He looks dead. And then Rebecca gives him last rites, which is great. But think about that, though. In the example in the basic set, you have a character death. So, yeah, you kind of knew going in your character might die. You get even more here on Dungeon Mastering as fine art. That's not in the rules. Everyone is here to have fun. Everything is balanced. Your character doesn't know that. Okay, just different things you can use here. We get credits. We get afterward. And I think, is that in this one? It might be... Oh, yeah. Oh, so here, everybody talks about Appendix N in the old Dungeon Master Guide. This gives you a really great list of books you can read for inspiration. Young adult fantasy, The Book of Three, Black Cauldron, Castle of Lear. So that's by by Lloyd Alexander. Frank L. Baum's Wizard of Oz. John Belair's The Face and the Frost. By the way, I love The Face and the Frost. That is a great, great book. Edgar Rice Burroughs, Lewis Carroll, Alan Garner, Ursula K. Le Guin, C.S. Lewis, nonfiction young adult. Richard Barber, A Companion to World Mythology. Walter Buer, Chivalry and the Mailed Knight. Olivia Coolidge, Greek myths. You get the idea. I'm sorry, I thought Virgil Finley's name is Virgil Hillier, Young People's Story of the Ancient World, Prehistory to 500 BC. And then there's adult fantasy as well. Paul Anderson, Three Hearts and Three Lions, excellent. The Broken Sword, excellent. I've actually reviewed that on this channel. Piers Anthony, Robert Asprin, Lee Brackett, J. Ramsey Campbell, Avram Davidson, The Island Under the Earth, Ursus of Ultima Thule, The Phoenix in the Mirror, Elsprag de Camp, The Fallible Fiend. That's a good one too. The Goblin Tower, de Camp and Fletcher Pratt, The Incomplete Enchanter, Land of Unreason. I'm actually reading that right now. I should have a review in a little while. We get Lord Dunsany. That's the first time a lot of people were going to ever learn about that. E.R. Edison's The Worm Ouroboros. Dude, odd book, and I absolutely fell in love with it when I read it. So you get the idea here, though. And then we also get some other stuff, some other names you might want to look for, short story collections, nonfiction, Jorge Luis Borges' The Book of Imaginary Beings, Bullfinch's Mythology, The Age of Fable, The Age of Chivalry, Funk and Wagnall's Standard Dictionary of Folklore, Mythology, and Legend. And here we get a glossary if you need to look something up very quickly. Ad for Gen Con, the index, and there we go. Really, one of the best role-playing games I think you can buy. Period, bar none. Very well organized. Explains everything. No, you don't have everything that you're ever going to need to play, but you get the expert set with it, and you throw in your imagination, or if you were getting Dungeon or Dragon Magazine, Dungeon Magazine, etc. You could play forever with this stuff. Absolutely wonderful. Love it, love it, love it. So if you don't own it, you might want to go out and find it. The fact of the matter is you could probably find an electronic version out there too. But it's a really good introduction. It's what I first learned to play D&D with when I was 12 years old. I've actually used this for introducing, people, even adults, to role-playing, because it doesn't give them so much they have to keep track of, and, they're not juggling a bunch of numbers and things like that. So it's good for that. My daughter, when she was little, we played a sort of modified version. There was no killing. People just got knocked out, Daughter was actually playing Dungeons and Dragons with friends today while I was making this video. So she stuck with it to some degree. Although I think they're playing one of the more modern versions. So, breaks a father's heart, but what can you do? So there you have it. TSR, Dungeons and Dragons, fantasy adventure game, basic, rulebook, Moldvay, basic, as we often say, from 1980. Might want to check that one out. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, throw it down there in the comments section. I'd love to hear from you and what you have to say about this game. If you have some memories of it, I'd love to hear it. Is this the first one you ever played? First book you ever had? Yeah, throw it out there, man. Let's have a little conversation. Let's talk about the good times and maybe the bad times if a character was killed. It happened. Happened a lot back in the old days. And you know what? You could roll a new one up in 5 minutes and it just kept rolling. Very cool. So leave any comments if you have them. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, maybe subscribe, maybe share with a friend. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. And I will hopefully see you again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.